Dr. Thomas, I just want to talk to you a little bit first about your research, specifically your work, Slaves of the State, Convict Labor, and Clemson Land and Legacy. Could you tell me a little bit about what inspired you to do the research, or how you kind of began that article?
I think it began probably shortly after I arrived at Clemson in 2007. I learned that there had been convict laborers involved in building the university, but as I talked to people and read the university's public history, I only found the word convict, and I didn't find any details about who the convicts were and how many they were and how long they were here and what they did. So I sort of was on this quest to find out more about them. I heard initially that it was an all African-American crew, and because I would do work in the 19th century African-American literature, of course, that was really interesting to me. So I started looking, and about a year ago, I guess it was, I decided to write the state penitentiary and ask if they had any records. And they told me they did not, but I should check with the state archives. So I went online and I found the archive website, and I noticed that they had a finding aid that listed some records for convicts. And so I started getting excited, and I thought, well, maybe they'll have some records. So I wrote to them, and they told me, the website said it would take 2 or 3 days to get back, but someone wrote back to me the next day and said, yes, we have the registers, we have descriptive roles, we have quite a bit of detail about who they were. So within about a week or two, I went to the archive and I looked in the records, and I was expecting to find, of course, this adult convict labor crew. And what I discovered was that among the crew was a 12-year-old boy, a couple 13-year-old boys. About a third of them were teenagers, and they were both black and white. So the story became far more complicated than the public narrative lets on.
Right. And so it sounds like you started this in 2007. You published it last spring. So this was kind of a long-form project for you.
Yep, it took 7 years.
Wow. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, it was a fabulous article. Now you mentioned, the word is convict. Is are the convicts of the past the same as today? Does that make sense? Like, is there kind of, there was 12-year-old and 13-year-old children.
Well, I think the system has changed, but some of the practices are the same. Back in the 19th century, people had told me that most of the men would have been arrested for vagrancy. There are lots of vagrancy laws, and because black men weren't working, it was easy to get picked up and put in jail. But I discovered that most of the convicts who work here, the convict laborers who worked here, had been arrested for theft. And I found that intriguing, and I thought, most of these crimes were like petty crimes. They would steal $5 worth of merchandise. And so I started looking into South Carolina laws, and what happens is during and after Reconstruction, the state legislature begins to change the laws so that they criminalize these petty thefts, and they make them felonies. And so if you get a felony, you go to the penitentiary. And so the example that I use today is dealing with a drug like cocaine. So crack cocaine, has these long mandatory sentences, whereas the powder, you get lighter sentences and you don't have as much trouble with the law. And so there's a correlation to what happens to the criminalization of blackness, and black males in particular, that I think is similar in both eras, but the actual system has changed. We have a juvenile justice system now. We wouldn't have 12-year-olds in the penitentiary in most cases with grown men, or if they committed a crime, that was a felony, a heinous crime, they would be segregated from that population. So I think the actual housing and the system itself, the justice system itself has changed, but some of the laws, I think you can find correlations between them.
Right. And you also mentioned, and kind of transitioning into See the Stripes almost, you mentioned in your research Clemson's revisionist history and kind of that problem. Could you talk a little bit about that right now?
Well, I think what bothered me is that we kind of hide behind these euphemisms. We talk about convicts, and everybody has an image in their mind about convict. I didn't think certainly that a 12-year-old would have been a convict working on Clemson property. I think the other thing that happens is as we tell the story, if you go on tours of our campus, I have never heard the word mentioned in a tour. So their story is completely erased, yet if you look at the historical record, our trustees say without their labor, Clemson would not exist. So if they were so critical to the establishment of this university, then why don't we publicly acknowledge them? The other thing is there was an encomium that was written in There's Something in Those Hills by one of our alums, and in that former President Barker described African Americans as African American farm workers, I think was the language. And when I saw that, I thought, well, who is he talking about? Were these the enslaved African Americans who worked here? Were these the sharecroppers? Were these the convict laborers? Because all of them had worked in the farm industry when they were on Clemson land. And so there's a big difference between calling someone a farm laborer or a farm worker and using the descriptive terms slave, convict, and sharecropper. So I keep running into that kind of language in our public narrative. Of course, there is a website on Fort Hill on Clemson's homepage. We do have kind of the quick overview of slavery. But when people go on tours of our campus, I've been told by many people that part of our history is not included. Some students have even said that they are discouraged from even mentioning it unless someone asks a question. And so it's hard to walk by that house and wonder what it is, and no one says really anything about the house. I think that we have a treasure trove of documents in our special collections that our students should have access to. So when we're talking about the era of slavery and Reconstruction, that we could actually be looking at primary documents that relate to our campus and our region, and we don't do that.
Is Clemson's problem, I guess, the mere thought of convicts building Clemson itself, or is this, entrenched deeper?
I'm going to let A.D. jump in, and then I'll jump back in.
I can't really speak to what the real problem may be, so to speak, but I can say that but Clemson isn't the only place that has issues with history, with capital H, singular. We all deal with it. It just so happens that when you are a public institution and then there are people who are reflected in the potential plural histories, and those individuals don't get an opportunity to see themselves, then it has real world right now effects. And the people who aren't represented by that history then feel detached from the place, and they feel detached from the time. And while everyone can be telling you that it's not an issue, because everyone who's telling you is included in the history, it makes you feel in a certain way that maybe I'm going crazy then. No one sees my issue. And so then you sort of become reduced to a history that doesn't reflect you, though it is sort of part of you. So it's like looking in the mirror and just seeing an outline of yourself, and there are no features there. I think that that is history in a lot of places. It's history in high schools, it's history in colleges, it's it's American history. That's the way it gets taught. It's certain facts are saved for February, that type of thing. So while I don't know what Clemson's particular problem may be, I know that ways that we can get about being better is by making our sort of our public history, our public narrative, something that is inclusive of these stories that are being researched, and that we have archives that that reveal so much more. I think that we can be better about that, and we can be better about being a very historical place that people come to visit, and we can be better about making sure that when our students are introduced to the Clemson family, that that we get the opportunity to know sort of more of what it means to be a part of that family, as opposed to just the happy parts. And, you know, I guess a question is, well, when do you get to know the other parts of the family history? And I mean, I guess there are any number of ways that we could possibly go about that, but I think that in a lot of ways it may be irresponsible to wait until someone is here and has bought into the entire positive narrative and then say, oh, by the way, and then not expect to have, you know, follow-up conversations, because I think that's jarring to anyone. And in a lot of cases, and it's not just mine, but I've heard other people, you know, shared with me that they found out in a similar way that I found out about some historical things, and then wanted to get more information, and the conversations kind of stopped at that moment.
Yeah. I think I had a similar experience. I came to Clemson as a postdoc visiting assistant professor right out of graduate school, and so, you know, I wasn't coming as a new hire, you know, tenure track professor, so I had a telephone interview. I looked at the website and said, oh, looks like a great place. I'm a South Carolinian, so it was interesting to think about coming back to South Carolina after I left so long ago. So when I first got on campus, one of my colleagues took me on a campus tour. So we went by Strode Tower, where the English department is. We walked across the bridge in front of Cooper Library, and then we started walking up this little hill. And so as we walked up the hill, he asked me to bend down and look up the hill. So I kind of bent down, and it was you know, August, and so the trees were, you know, fully leafed. And I looked and I said, I don't see anything. And he said, tip your head further down. And so I did, and I saw the house. And I turned to him and I said, where am I? No one told me this. You know, I would like to have known this before I got here. So there was Fort Hill, and then there was the Calhoun Honors College, there was the Strom Thurmond Institute, there was Tillman Hall. There were all of these buildings that are named for Confederate officers. And so it just seemed like the more I looked around, and these were things that I really found out mostly on my own. It matters. It matters to people of African descent. I think it should matter to everyone. This is not just Clemson family history. It's not just Southern history. It's American history. You know, so if this is American history and we're coming to Clemson either to be educators or to be educated or to participate in this educational process, then it would seem that the university is one of the best places to learn that history, and also to learn how to have those difficult dialogues about history that is, as I've been told, complicated, controversial, complex. You know, we just need to tell it like it is and not be afraid ourselves to engage in conversations about the history, and then teach our students how to have those dialogues. Because America is changing, the world is changing, and so all of us are going to have more encounters with people who are not like us. And if we don't learn how to have those conversations, if we don't learn how to see the world through other people's eyes, if we don't learn how to be respectful of that, then are we really giving our students the education that they deserve? So for me, you know, as someone who's steeped in 19th century African American literature, it's a natural thing for me to do. I'm very comfortable talking about the history, and I want to help other people to not just know the history, but know how to talk about it, to have the language and the skills and the comfort level to talk about it and realize it's important. It's very important. If we're really going to be a family, then we have to acknowledge all parts of our history. And I think for me, you know, on a professional level, but then on a personal level, because I am a South Carolinian, I'm a 6th generation South Carolinian. My parents, who went to school in the 50s, could not come to Clemson University. You know, they went to historically black colleges over in Columbia because Clemson was off limits to African Americans at that time. So I'm a member of the first generation in my family that could have applied to Clemson. By the time I went to college, we had left the state, as thousands of African Americans had, seeking better opportunities elsewhere. So, you know, people on our campus, have relatives and family members that were not allowed to come to Clemson. And so we're doing them a disservice and not really exploring this history and talking about the legacy of slavery and the legacy of segregation and the legacy of Jim Crow. And when we have someone like Ben Tillman, who was the architect of Jim Crow, who fomented violence against African Americans, who was really the person responsible not just for helping Clemson come to be, but blocking the door for African Americans to come here, then we have a moral obligation to reckon with that history and ensure that we understand it and that we use that knowledge to make Clemson a more diverse and inclusive place.
How does that, how do you feel? How do we remedy that?
I think there needs to be a conversation about our buildings. Tillman Hall was not Tillman Hall originally. It was Main Hall. It was an administrative building, and the Board of Trustees voted to change the name to Tillman Hall. I'm still trying to find out why that came to be, and nobody really seems to understand how that happened. So, our most prominent photographed and recognizable building, the one that represents our university, has been renamed Tillman Hall. I think we need to have a conversation about that. Is that how we want to represent ourselves? When we don't talk about who he is, then it's not a problem. But when we know who he is, then I think we have an obligation to think about, is that really the building that we should name after him? Yes, he was a trustee. Yes, he was instrumental in bringing Clemson into being. But I think that part of what we're trying to do with the Race in the University initiative this year is to have the campus really engage in dialogues about, how we represent ourselves. And is this truly, if we are a family, if we're inclusive, if we're diverse, is this really the best way to represent ourselves and to attract that diverse pool of students and faculty and staff who would joyfully, be a part of the Clemson family, but who find it difficult to navigate when there are monuments and memorials, to these men all over our campus, and we don't see a correlating, recognition of others, particularly of African Americans, who also, made major contributions to this university.
I was wondering, do you know when they changed the name of Tillman Hall? That's really interesting.
I don't know right off the top of my head. I know it was the early 20th century. I think it was in the 1930s or 40s. Like I said, I just recently found out, and I think I was told it's in the Board of Trustees minutes because it was a Board of Trustees action. And so I've also been told that those minutes are available. So one of the things I'll be doing this semester is following up, on that lead and trying to figure out if there's a record of why that change came about. And I'm working with some Winthrop University researchers who also had convict laborers build their college. And they are interested too because they said the same thing. Nobody really knows. But they have a building identical to ours standing on their campus.
This is really interesting because Tillman Hall's already changed names already. Would you foresee it as good or beneficial, or even as possible, it might be possible in the future that Tillman Hall would change its name once again?
I think it's a Board of Trustees decision. So, I think if students, if faculty, if staff come forward and say, we'd like for you all to have a discussion about this and here are our reasons, maybe they would, but, because it's not something that we could kind of have a grassroots effort and sign a petition and get it done. I think right now, part of the reason for the dialogue is to think about things that we want to change. And if there is enough support for considering a change of that name, then we could, send a letter or send a petition to the administration and ask them to consider that. And we would just have to, see what their decision would be. And I think it's not just Tillman Hall, but it's also just thinking about the whole campus. Hardin Hall used to be the chemistry building. We could kind of go around and see. We really don't know the history of any of the buildings' names. So there might be other buildings that whose name was changed for various reasons. And I think that's part of the conversation that we're going to have this year. What's the process? Why is it there's only one building on campus, the Harvey and Lucinda Gant building, named for African Americans? Are there other places where we could put names on buildings or auditoriums or other places, public spaces, where that history could be more visible and a part of who we are?
A.D., as See the Stripes grows, could that possibly, could See the Stripes bring students together to possibly enact that kind of change?
Well, I think that what we will be sort of focusing on doing is facilitating those conversations with students, because what I've discovered over the past week is that the overwhelming majority of the students who have interacted, either through email or social media, have been fairly straightforward in their admitting that they didn't know much of the information that existed in that video, and that they're glad that we are in a situation where we're about to start having conversations, or this has been a springboard for a conversation with that particular person and their friends. So I think that it has the potential to be a space where people do begin talking about those things. And I have seen some of those comments online. And I haven't been directly advocating for any of those things, so much as saying that one of the goals that we want to see is that more people are having conversations. So I imagine that will be one of the conversations that many people will have, because there's something about learning information that makes you want to act, and a logical action to take with history that is not agreeable in the way that it could potentially make you feel, say about a building or a building named for a particular person. I think that a logical space that a person would go to is, well, what do we do about the naming of that place? Or what do we do about the fact that it is there? What are our next logical steps? So I can very easily see people taking that question up, and and then perhaps investigating protocol to get the attention of someone who has the authority to do something of that sort.
Okay. I'm going to take it back to the beginning, A.D., and ask you, this is just basic for people who might not know, what is See the Stripes?
Well, See the Stripes is essentially a campaign to raise awareness about this this history that we don't see publicly, and also a means of directing people toward that information, but then getting people to talk about conversations, or getting people into conversations not only about the history, but conversations about these things that make them feel as though they aren't a part of the larger conversations that are going on now. So I believe that they're directly related in that, as I said earlier, when a person doesn't see him or herself in the history, then it has a manifestation here and now, and it's very easy then to believe, because of whatever the common narrative is, or whatever the narrative that is sort of being the student is being is involved in, says that, well, when I bring up this particular thing, then no one really wants to talk about it, or when this particular topic comes up, then I'm the default expert. And what we want to do is sort of bring all of those things out and see ourselves as a family, see ourselves as a tiger that has embraced its stripes and embraced the difference that may exist in a room with many different people from many different places, as opposed to I guess what's seen as politically correct, but is ultimately the erasure of any kind of difference. So we're really just trying to get students involved in this effort that Dr. Thomas is, like the things that Dr. Thomas has researched I think that it's extremely important information that the students know. And yeah, I'm not so certain that you know, handing out copies of the South Carolina Review is going to get the students to want to have that conversation. So how do we actively engage the campus community in a conversation about these extremely important issues? And so that's what we're attempting to do, is to engage people where they are. And if we can do that, then, you know, there may be a bit of discomfort, but I think that we will be better for it.
Good. And so it sounds like, how did See the Stripes come to be? Was it inspired by Dr. Thomas's research?
Well, actually, there were moments before I met Dr. Thomas that these things were sort of in me. And as I said before, I was recording, and I'd done 2 projects. Or actually, I'd only done 1 project at that time that dealt specifically with Fort Hill, and there was music and poetry, and you know, it started with the South Carolina band and mixing in some other voices through history, and that was, you know, it was a very, very personal project, kind of my story combined with, well, there were some movies at the time. It was Django Unchained, and it was 12 Years a Slave in Fruitvale Station, and the Zimmerman Verdict, and moving to South Carolina, and all of these things kind of came together, and I created that project, but I wasn't satisfied. So I'd recorded 1 video, and I put it online, and I think part of it was actually recorded on top of the Strom Thurmond Institute. And then the other part was in front of Fort Hill. Then at a research forum, Dr. Thomas was presenting her, the Slaves of the State article, and I'd already had an interaction with some people at Fort Hill. I was wearing a black shirt at Fort Hill. It was a Friday because that was the day that I didn't have class, and these women said to me, "Well, you must be a freshman," and you know, I said, "Well, no, I'm not a freshman, but thank you." And then they said, "Well, you must not be from around here." And then I said, "Well, why? I don't understand." And they said, "Well, because we're solid orange, and you don't have on orange, so we figured that you must be new here or not from around. I mean, you know, like not from around here or a new student." And so I thought it was interesting, and I went home and I got on social media, and jokingly, I said to my friends as we're having this conversation, this thread is going on, I say, "Well, you know what, I'm a tiger, but I represent the stripes." So that was sort of an ongoing joke, you know, with me amongst my friends who are here, and I said, "Well, you know, we can wear black shirts, and you know, we'll be the stripes." And it wasn't until hearing Dr. Thomas's presentation, and specifically the convict labor, that I went to talk to her after the talk, and you know, just kind of thinking, well, is there a way that I can help out? Because I believe lots of people need to know this information. I've been feeling a certain way for a really long time. And then that was when the idea of the poem came. You know, how do we get the information out there? And so then we started thinking about stripes, and we thought, you know, the sharecroppers, you know, in the land, you know, the stripes, and we thought of slaves in the stripes that would be created by, you know, a whip. And then convict laborers, the stripes on the uniforms. But then, you know, there was just so much to go with. But I think that it was that moment, hearing that talk, that made me realize that we have something that we can go with. So this joke becomes something that's extremely serious, and it has the power to engage people in this conversation. And I think the power to engage the people in the conversation is because the stakes are really low to join the conversation. We can be a tiger still. We don't have to change that. The only thing we need to do is to look at the tiger in its fullness. And in a sense, we're not trying to change history.
Oh, not at all.
All we're trying to do is widen our view so that we can see the fullness, or see a fullness. And, you know, another really, you know, interesting point I think that has been brought up very often is when you ask anyone outside of the Clemson world a question like, what is the defining characteristic of a tiger? The response to that isn't always its stripes. so no one ever saw a tiger and said, wow, I love the orange on that tiger. And it's not to say that the orange is not important. It's extremely important. But I think that this is also one of those things that is kind of off-putting, because solid oranges, I mean, it's great. It unifies people and it makes people feel a part of something. But when we start talking about that distinguishing characteristic, when we start talking about pride, when we start talking about diversity, I think that we need to start embracing the fact that most people see the defining characteristic of the tiger as its stripes. So we need to be proud of our stripes and, you know, in a way, show our stripes. So it was a combination, a combination of things that led us to having that conversation. And then we kind of got into the, you know, sort of organizing, and then I had to go home and start writing, and I started reading. I read Dr. Thomas's article, and I read the Clemson biography, and then I read Craig Stephen Wilder's Ebony and Ivy, because I wanted to make sure that I had some factual information. I wasn't going to just write a poem based on the way I felt. And then I also asked Dr. Thomas if I could email her drafts of the poem to make sure that I'm not misrepresenting information that she's worked a really long time putting together. So it was a pretty slow process, and then ultimately over the summer I started to come back to campus and start recording stuff so we can put the video together, because I also thought that a great way to make sure that this was going to be rendered in its best form would be not just the text of a poem, but it would be the text of the poem, the music that accompanies it, and something visual to show us what the stripes look like.
Wow. Who knew that just women who just were like, we don't wear orange today. This whole movement has come of it. And it sounds like, I mean, some people, I feel like scared people say, well, this movement's gonna, whatever, you know, take away from Clemson, but it sounds like making Clemson more whole.
Yeah, and really, well, I guess one of the follow-up conversations that A.D. and I had, I told him he sparked my interest in the tiger. So I started reading up on the tiger because I'm like, if we're really going to use this as our symbol, as representative of who we are, then let's understand what the tiger is. So, you know, we talked about the tiger needs his stripes, you know, to camouflage in the wild. The tiger stripes are unique to each tiger. So that's how they identify the tiger, is by the tiger stripes. And I think for me, one of the most interesting thing about those stripes is that they're not just black, but they're also beige, and they're brown, and they're white. You know, so I think if people really understood, you know, what the stripes are on a tiger, they see that those stripes represent diversity. You know, it's not just recovering the story of African Americans who labored here, but it's acknowledging and celebrating the diversity that the tiger represents. And that's what See the Stripes, and that's what Race in the University of Campus Dialogue are all about. It's really saying, hey, we are a diverse community. We want to be even more diverse and inclusive, and the tiger can actually help us to accomplish that goal.
I definitely want to talk about the, you mentioned Race in the University, I believe it's called, the dialogue that's starting. Let's talk about that. How was that previously planned? Is that effort from the students?
Well, I think it also kind of goes back to 2007 and even before I arrived. I'm in the Department of English. I have a lot of colleagues who care deeply about this conversation. Some of them were working in the classroom doing research before I got here. Susanna Ashton was one of the first people to actually do some research on Fort Hill and publish. And then she was joined by new junior faculty who came, and then I came in. And so we had just been kind of working in the classroom and doing our own research, but we wanted to sort of widen our scope. And so we started bringing speakers in. We started going on field trips. We started taking our students on archival research trips. And then I was selected to be on the College of Architecture, Arts, and Humanities, our Faculty Arts Council. And so we did one-year programs. It was great. And then last year, as we were thinking about what we wanted to do, we decided to come up with a book club. So Dean Goodstein asked each of us to bring in a book to pitch it to the committee. And at the time, I happened to be reading Craig Wilder's Ebony and Ivy in preparation for a panel that I was doing, and I was going to make a presentation on my convict labor research. So I took my book, and I remember sitting around the table, and each of us had about 2 or 3 minutes to pitch our book to each other. And so I did. I pitched it to the committee. We had a conversation. It was a unanimous decision to adopt the book. So we said, all right, let's bring Craig Wilder to campus. So that was going to be it. We were going to have a faculty book club. We were going to bring Professor Wilder in. And then we kept talking. And we said, well, maybe we'll have a semester-long series of programs. So we thought, we had so many ideas that it ended up being this year-long series of programs, and we've called it, Race in the University, a Campus Conversation. So it actually starts with a See the Stripes Dance, Poetry, and Music Fest next month. And then every month there are 2 to 3 events, either an art exhibit or some kind of lecture or workshop or festival or program that people can come to. We also have a student subcommittee, and we've asked each of those students to organize a dialogue in their own community. So we want as many people as possible to be engaged in this conversation so that everybody has access to information and, to sort of go off on what A.D. said, knowledge is power. So once you have knowledge, and I think it also means responsibility, that you have a responsibility to share what you're learning, and then to really think about, how does this change the way I think of myself as a tiger, and we think of ourselves as a family. If we're going to keep that language, then we really need to be a family. Mm-hmm. We need to be an inclusive family. We need to be a family that's not afraid to embrace our history and to use it to our advantage. This past summer, I met an African-American family. Their daughter's coming here. They came by to see me. We had a wonderful conversation, and near the end, I said, did they tell you all that Clemson is located on a plantation? And the conversation just stopped. And I said, it's okay. It's okay. Think about the fact that your daughter is enrolled at a college on land where people like her were once slaves. That I, as a professor, am teaching at a university on a plantation, where people like me were once enslaved or sharecroppers, or, whose sons would have been among the convict laborers. That's a powerful narrative. And the whole conversation changed, and they were like, wow, you're right. You're right. That's a powerful narrative. So embracing that story doesn't mean that, Clemson is an embarrassment. Clemson was not the only place where this history played out. This is a story of the South. We have universities all over the South who are kind of coming to grips with this history and trying to decide what to do in the 21st century. So I think one of the other things that can come out of both See the Stripes and Race in the University is that Clemson can become a model for how to have these difficult dialogues, for how to reckon with the past. That we are stepping forward and saying we're going to embrace this history and we're going to use it to make Clemson a stronger university. And I think, other people can come here and see what we're doing. They can be inspired by what we're doing. They can engage in that conversation on their campuses or in their towns and communities. And, we can use this, to make, this whole region, a more diverse and inclusive place for students and faculty and staff.
Definitely. I speak with people both who wholeheartedly approve, or not approve, but I guess agree or support See the Stripes and the new movements, and people who are very nervous about it. Mm-hmm. And it's primarily, Northerners versus Southerners. I'm from the North, but then I have Southern friends who are like, well, we're embarrassed about it.
Mm-hmm. But why embarrassed? If you're embarrassed about Clemson's history, you need to be embarrassed about American history. History is not supposed to make you feel good. As one of my favorite commentators said when he came to campus, Tanisha Coates said that. A question was asked, about, this history, this horrible history, why should we study it? History is to give you a sense of where you've come from, It's to give you an opportunity to learn from the past, to not repeat the mistakes of the past. When we look around, most of us, if we're from the South, some way our families are tangled up in this history. I tell people the history of South Carolina is written on my skin. I have ancestors who were slaves, I have ancestors who were slaveholders, I have ancestors who were Native Americans, and I have ancestors who were African. And so those are the 4 major groups that were here. I represent all of them. So if anybody should be embarrassed, I should be embarrassed. But I'm not. I want to know as much about that history as possible because it's so important. It's so important to understand where we came from and where, so we'll know really kind of how to get where we want to go. We've got this roadmap, and diversity should be a critical component of that roadmap. And I truly believe that looking at this history and reckoning with it is going to help us to fulfill those goals for becoming a more diverse community.
Well, and I'll say also that, we find ourselves, even with whatever embarrassment, may sort of manifest, when talking about whatever it is that we might talk about, we're here. I mean, so when we talk about who benefited or did not benefit, we're all the beneficiaries because we are here. We get the opportunity to sit here in these chairs and have this conversation, or to take classes or to teach classes, or, the things that we are doing here. Each of us, no matter where we come from, are beneficiaries of what went on here because we are affiliated with Clemson University. And, as I said earlier, I want it to be a point of pride, even more than just receiving the degree, that I went to school in a place where difficult conversations were things that we did. We decided we were going to do it. And while that may sort of begin with some kind of embarrassment, imagine the pride of being able to hang that on your wall, because you're not just hanging the purple and gold insignia there. You're also able to say that part of something that was potentially transformative to people who weren't engaged, and it helped me as well. Because I started in a place where I was kind of embarrassed to have the conversation and ended up able to facilitate conversations. I believe that's, if we want to get into narratives that make us feel better, I think that's a pretty good narrative to be able to spin, at lunch or brunch, whatever it is that you do. So I think that it's an opportunity. We shouldn't look at it as a problem. We should look at it as an opportunity. And so that's the way that I like to present to people what my aims are in trying to get us to have difficult dialogues, is look at it as an opportunity for us to be better, and for us to also, like Dr. Thomas said, be an example to some of the other places who are still wrestling with what to do.
Tell me. I wanted to talk to you about basically responses to See the Stripes. I just mentioned the people who might be embarrassed, or people who would totally support it. What are some reactions you've seen?
Well, I want to say that the positive responses far outnumber the negative responses, and I'm glad for that. I believe that the response from the Clemson community has far exceeded my expectations. That people, from students, staff, faculty, administrators, have been extremely receptive. And that is the majority of the reactions, the responses and interactions that I've had. It's not to say that there aren't negative, and I'd be claiming to be superhuman if I told you that negative responses don't affect me in some kind of way. And it's not that they make me sad or that they make me angry. It's just in the same way that when You know, I can imagine whatever it is that you do, the small criticisms are those things that sort of nag at you. Or, you know, someone misinterpreting a metaphor. You know, you have a media outlet who prints something that is not representative of what the campaign is. Or, you know, you have someone who gives a comment that, you know, seems as though the person did not fully understand what they were describing when they gave that comment. Those are the types of things that, that make me, I think, you know, it makes me set my feet and you know, sort of my shoulders and my chin and say, we need to be having this conversation. We don't want to have it deflected or to have it changed into all of these other things. What we're trying to talk about is something that is productive. I'm not into arguing. I'm not trying to debate. What I want to do is have a conversation about these issues that mean a lot to me, and mean a lot to my classmates, mean a lot to my colleagues, and mean a lot to the people who are around here. So like I said, on social media, I've gotten screenshots from people having some tough dialogues. I mean, and some of them have been really tough. And then there's some that have been just outright ignorant. And those are the ones that get shut down really quickly, primarily because no one wants to deal in ignorance. But then, you know, there was the message the other day. I got a couple emails and a tweet from a woman who says she's a descendant of John Calhoun. And she says that she's supportive of the campaign and wants to know how she can help. And I think that's what we're trying to move toward. To have something like that happen is extremely positive in my view, because then if you do have this dissent or you have detractors, and we have this sort of metaphorical family, you have someone who is a direct descendant who says, I'm willing to have the conversation. So, you know, I feel like that kind of trumps the, you know, the person who just really loves wearing an orange t-shirt on Fridays and believes that I'm trying to change their wardrobe, because that's clearly not the point.
Right. You mentioned some media outlets twisting your words, misinterpreting a metaphor. I guess there's been some articles out there that really concentrate on one of your points, and I'm not sure how they wrote it, but, you know, A.D. comparing the Clemson football program to slavery or associating it with that. And that's kind of, I think it's a big headline because it's, you know, buzzworthy, I guess. Can you just...
I was going to say, and I think it was not just slavery, but I think one of them said that he compared the football players to slaves.
Yeah, that was it.
And yeah, I was going to say, so it was not the institution which he's critiquing, but actually saying that our football players are the equivalent of slaves.
Yeah, and I think that's it's not a very nuanced reading by any stretch. But, you know, one of the things that I do make a direct relationship or a correlation between is the fact that we have Fort Hill. It's at the top of this hill, and if you go out into the street and then you sort of pivot 90 degrees, you're looking directly into the eyes of the tiger overlooking the football field. So there's something a little spooky there. And I say that without this acknowledgement or without this understanding that this most exciting 25 seconds of football that we have, if we take the hill that the players are running down all the way up to its summit, it's right in front of that house. So there is a connection between players, bodies on a field, generating entertainment, excitement, income, prestige, all of those things. There's a connection between that and what went on in our past. So, no, I'm not saying that our roster of football players are slaves. I'm saying that there is a connection between the institution that existed here previously and what goes on here now. And without understanding that, like, you can sort of unwittingly be a part of this metaphor that is really close to something that seems very real. And I'm not the first person to say something about that. I believe that there are plenty of people who are talking about that. I mean, and even at the professional level, the book $40 Million Slaves, I mean, I think deals with that particularly. Or we can deal with what's going on right now with the O'Bannon case with, you know, student athletes and being compensated for their talent and their time. And I believe that that is an issue that, I mean, that qualifies in my mind as a stripes conversation as well. So I would say that what we're trying to do is speaking on behalf of the student athletes more than against the student athletes, because we need to also be understanding that while it is the most exciting 25 minutes or 25 seconds in college football, that the people who are involved in that, while they do get a free education and while they do get recognition and, you know, they do, I don't know what else they get, but while they do have these benefits of being a part of that team and a part of this program, there are some conversations going on out there that says that they should perhaps get a bit more because there's so much more that's being made off of them. So I believe that that is sort of an, like I said, a very sort of not clumsy necessarily, but a casual reading of what I'm trying to say and not really getting at the heart of what's going on. But, you know, I can't imagine that you can pit this message against the football players. I would say that that this is sort of in their favor, or in the favor of the idea of student athletes and what some people might call exploitation.
Well, I think it's also easy to latch on to something that, just something minor, you know, that you want to critique, and then that becomes sort of the lens through which you look at the entire piece. You know, you don't really read it, you know, and then when I was reading some of it, I thought, did they watch the whole video? You know, did they really get to the end? Because I think one of the most powerful things that A.D. and I talked about is when, you know, there's that litany of think, you know, of just think, you know, and it's like, are they thinking? You know, are they taking the admonition and really thinking about the whole idea that he's presenting? And instead of getting stuck, you know, on the hill and saying, oh my, you know, he's attacking, you know, this most exciting part of being a Tiger is going to a football game. And for some people it is. And we talked, you know, about, okay, there are going to be some people, because you are providing commentary on something that's near and dear to the hearts of our fans and our students, that they're going to sort of respond in a very defensive mechanism, and some have. But we also have been receiving lots of good feedback and positive affirmations of what A.D. is doing. Even some of our alums are hearing about the Race in the University initiative and what he's done, and are writing long letters talking about how you know, they're part of this South Carolina history. We got a letter from an alum the other day, and he talked about sort of how this, like this descendant of Calhoun, how his own family is kind of intertwined in this history. So, you know, like me, who says, yes, I'm here and I'm a part of Clemson, and my family's history is also part of Clemson and South Carolina history. A lot of people seem to have been waiting for the moment and the opportunity to have the conversation that we're initiating, and finding different ways, you know, to contribute and enrich that conversation. And I'm just really excited about some of the things that are going to be said publicly, I think, for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, very exciting. This is such a successful movement. I mean, this is in years of Clemson's history. I mean, this is huge. We're talking about it in one of my classes. I'm just like, it's impressive.
It's doing what we designed it to do,
yeah.
And that's to spark conversation, right. Not debate, not arguments. You know, some people are going to go down those roads, but we really just want to have a conversation. And when you have a conversation, it leads to positive results. When we're civil, when we're thoughtful, when we're open and honest, that's when real change comes. And that's what this is all about.
Yeah, building, you know, that's, you know, my friends, you know, when they say, you know, well, yeah, I want to build with you. I mean, and the idea behind saying I would like to build with you is, you know, can we have a conversation? And that's what we're doing. You know, in no way are we attempting to be destructive, but we would like to build. And I think that, I mean, imagine the monuments that can be constructed with this particular conversation, to say, again, that now the bricks that go into what we're currently attempting to do come from students from many different communities, and many people are reflected. So, you know, when we are looking at, you know, sort of this metaphorical mirror, we see we see ourselves, but we see sort of this enriched version of ourselves because of the benefit of the conversations that we've had with all the people we've come in contact with. Because it's amazing to me even that sometimes you can go to school with so many different kinds of people and leave with the same kinds of friends you had before you came. Yeah. Or, you know, everyone looks like you, acts like you, talks like you, comes from the same place, but you've been around so many different kinds of people for 4 years of your life. To me, that's sort of amazing, because I would think that one of the benefits of going out into the world is that, you know, you can sort of see things in the world that are interesting and that you really like, and then those things become a part of your experience as well, as opposed to saying, I sat in class with someone who comes from that country. But then beyond that, you have nothing to say about that person or the country or the experience, primarily because there was nothing that encouraged you to get into, you know, a conversation with that individual.
And I would just say, just to kind of build on that a little bit, is that this conversation should be a bridge. You know, we're building together, but we're also building bridges, you know, between various individuals, various communities. One of the other aspects we haven't talked about much is that one of the things Race and the university is going to do is actually reach out into the community surrounding Clemson. So we have a program where when Professor Wilder is going to be here, that he's going to facilitate a conversation, and we're going to invite, you know, people whose family may have worked here, or students whose family may not have been able to attend, or people who have had various kinds of relationships with the university, to come in and say, we're not just dealing with our campus community, but we're also dealing with the community and people who've had some kind of interaction or relations or whatever it is with the university, to say, we just don't want to focus on Clemson itself, but we want to think about the impact we're having in our region, in the upstate, and how we can better facilitate that towns and gowns relationship, so that people are not just coming on campus. We want them, of course, to come for our athletic programs. We also want them to come for our lectures. We want them to come for other programs, or if there are programs that we can develop that will encourage a greater variety of people to come on campus, then we want to know what that is. And I think having this conversation, we hope, is going to be another bridge for Clemson into the community to be a more to have a more beneficial relationship with the upstate area.
Excellent. We're winding down, but I wanted to ask, just kind of generally, what is your hope for the future in terms of See the Stripes, in terms of Race in the university, the movement being successful?
You know, my hope is that without being prompted, conversations continue, and that you know, a year down the road, 2 years, 3 years down the road, someone comes here to Clemson and they're visiting perhaps, and they go back home and they say, one of the really cool things about the visit that I took to the school that I went to was that we had these conversations about things that people seem to not really get into in other places. And that's the reason that I want to be a Clemson Tiger. I believe that that would be success in my mind.
I think I have very similar aspirations, in that I would like for Clemson to be a place where having these kinds of conversations is just normal. It's just a part of who we are. You know, that when people come here, they know that part of being a Clemson Tiger is learning how to have difficult dialogues. And also, part of being a Clemson Tiger is having a diverse, you know, community of people around you, that you are comfortable with friends from all different parts of the world, all different parts of the United States, that you understand how that enriches your life in ways that you just can't imagine if you don't do it. And so coming here teaches you how to do that and gives you opportunities to do that. And then think of the impact that we have when, you know, our Tigers go all over the world, you know, with that kind of mindset. The ripple effect would just be phenomenal. So that's what I'd like to see. Excellent.
Any final thoughts? Anything I haven't asked or that you wanted to elaborate upon?
Just just want to encourage people to participate in the events and exhibitions for race in the university. And if they have questions, to come directly to us, find us on campus, email us. We're not hard to track down, and to keep an open mind, And even if there's embarrassment, that's okay to come to a program and say, hey, this really embarrasses me, and to talk about why, instead of kind of holding back and saying, oh, I don't want to do that because it's too hard or it's too painful or it's too embarrassing. To sort of use that as the means or the mechanism to get engaged, in the conversation itself.
And I would say that, I would encourage each individual to sort of be introspective, and as opposed to, like if there is this idea that this isn't for me, kind of try to consider how you are the stripes, because I believe that we all offer something to that question particularly. How do I represent the stripes? Because I think that we all bring different experiences, no matter, it could be, myself and my brother, and we're both going to bring different experiences here. And so if we are stripes and we are all, identifiably different, what is that? And so I think that that's a way to enter into the conversation as well, as opposed to asking, what does this have to do with me in the antagonistic way, asking what does this have to do with me, as in how am I a stripe, or how am I the stripes?
And how you can make a contribution, that once you've done that thinking, then say, how can I join the conversation? Because there'll be multiple opportunities to do that.
Definitely. Thank you guys so much. I just wanted to, A.D., to ask you, if someone wants to be involved in See the Stripes, how would they get involved or find See the Stripes?
Well, on Facebook, we are the See the Stripes Clemson University. On Twitter, we are Tiger Stripes, letter CU. And there's a website called cstripescu.org. And either of those places, you will be able to get information, you'll be able to get in contact, and then there's information sort of disseminated on a regular basis.